I'm 81. My Amish husband chose the midwife before I knew I was pregnant. The paper is folded twice beneath Jacob's winter shirt, the one with black horn buttons and a tear beside the right cuff. I shouldn't be looking. I know that before I touch it. The room is cold enough to cloud the mirror above the washstand, and the third floorboard from the chest gives one small click, not its usual squeak, a click. That's what I still hear. On the paper is a woman's name in my husband's stiff hand, Martha Zook. Under it is a date 3 weeks before I miss my monthly bleeding, 2 weeks before the first strange pull low in my belly, and a full month before anyone tells me I might be carrying a child. My fingers go numb. The page feels rough, almost furry, with a brown thumbprint near the bottom that smells of lamp oil. I remember thinking Martha had been chosen to mend a coat. No, wait. That's what I told myself. I knew she was a midwife. I just didn't know why Jacob had chosen mine before I knew there was a baby, or who had told him. Then I see the note beneath her name. 6 words pressed so hard the pen has cut the paper. Sarah is not to be asked. My knees touch the cedar chest. Outside, a buggy wheel knocks once against frozen ground, and then the whole house goes quiet. I am 81 years old now. Quick pause. I'm Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it lets me keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, when did someone else decide what you could know? And if you want to go further, a super chat or membership says these voices are worth hearing. Now, back to what happened. What happened was that I put the paper back under the shirt with the torn cuff and spent the morning kneading bread with hands that wouldn't warm. In our district, a wife's body belonged first to God, then to the order of the home, and only last to herself. Nobody said it that plainly. They didn't have to. We learned it when women lowered their voices around birth, when girls were sent outside before a cow was bred, when the bishop's wife shut the red pantry door before speaking to a new bride. The teaching was that a husband carried the household, so he made choices meant to protect it. In our house, protection could look exactly like secrecy. That's the thing nobody tells you. A rule can be wrapped in care so tightly that you don't feel the rope until you try to move. I was 22 then. No, 23. I lose that year because winter seemed to swallow it. The rule lived in small things. Jacob chose which healer we saw, an older man 2 valleys over, whose black bag smelled of camphor. He answered questions at the feed store, while I stood beside the flour barrel, even when the question was about me. At washing day, women spoke of being poorly or having a turn, never blood, pain, or fear. Once, when I was 15, I asked Aunt Ruth why Lena had missed meeting for 6 Sundays. Ruth pinched a wet sheet between 2 wooden pegs and said, "Some doors stay shut for kindness." Then she looked at me until my face burned. Lena returned thinner, with a pale green ribbon at her bonnet, and no one asking where her baby was. I understood. Questions didn't bring truth. They brought eyes. And eyes could follow you past the walnut tree, through supper, and into bed. Jacob and I had been married 11 months when I found Martha's name. My younger sister, Elsie, prepared me for marriage 3 nights before the wedding, while we shelled peas into a blue enamel bowl. She gave me 9 words. Be still, be good, and don't make him ashamed. 9. I counted them later because counting was easier than wondering. Jacob's mother, Mary, gave him even less. I know that now. She told him a wife might take sick after marriage, and that he should fetch a woman who knew what to do. Martha was that woman. She had delivered Jacob, his 4 brothers, and half the children on Mill Creek Road. Her name appeared in family Bibles beside birth dates, never beside choices made in locked rooms. Jacob thought choosing her early was wisdom. I thought not being told meant I had done something wrong. Neither of us knew enough to question that fear. I loved him. I think I loved him. I know I loved the way he warmed my boots near the stove before dawn, turning them by the heels so the leather wouldn't crack. He could calm a nervous horse with 2 fingers above its nose, and he saved the crisp edge of cornbread for me. We met at a Sunday singing in Eli Hostetler's barn, under rafters dusted white from the harvest meal. Jacob was 24, no, 25. I can see him pulling at the seam of his left sleeve while asking whether I liked the hymn on page 112. He wasn't bold, that mattered. I trusted quiet men because loud ones made my shoulders rise. But quiet can hide ignorance as well as kindness, and sometimes the two share a coat. He didn't plan to frighten me. He was trying, in the only way he knew, to be ready. 3 days after I found the note, Mary came carrying dried raspberry leaves and a folded square of old linen. She set both beside my sugar crock without looking at me. "For later," she said. I asked what later meant. Her right thumb rubbed the jar lid in slow circles, scraping rust. "A woman knows," she answered. That was the lesson. At quilting the next afternoon, Ruth asked whether I had been sleeping well. Elsie stared at a crooked row of brown stitches and pushed her needle so hard it struck the wooden frame. Nobody said baby. Nobody said month. Nobody asked whether I wanted Martha, trusted her, or knew what would happen if my body changed. They brought cloth, leaves, and silence. By Friday, even the empty cradle in Mary's loft felt like it had heard news about me first. Then, just after supper, Martha's buggy turned into our lane. The smallest thing I remember is snow melting from Martha's boot into a dark half-moon on the rag rug. The kitchen is lit by one kerosene lamp, its chimney smoked black on the wall side. A chair has been pulled close to the stove, though I didn't put it there, and my gray wool dress scratches beneath my arms because I've been sweating in the cold. Outside, wind taps loose tin above the woodshed. Tap, pause, tap. Jacob stands by the sink with both hands flat on the dry board, his knuckles pale as peeled apples. Martha removes her bonnet, smooths the strings, and places it beside the bread box as if this is ordinary. But no one drinks the coffee I pour. Steam curls from 3 cups and disappears. The room smells of chicory, damp wool, and the sharp yellow soap I used that morning. Martha asks when my bleeding last came. She says it softly, but the word hits the room like a dropped pan, because I've never heard a woman say it before a man. I look at Jacob. He looks at the stove door. "Sarah?" Martha says. "Think back." My palms press against my skirt, finding the raised line where I repaired the hem with thread too dark for the cloth. "I count Sundays. I lose 1. Start again. 5 weeks," I whisper. "Maybe 6. Jacob breathes out, long and shaky. "So it's likely?" he asks. "Not me, her." Martha nods once. I want her to be wrong, and I want her to explain everything. My stomach feels hollow enough to ring. "Why did you know?" I ask him. His mouth opens, then closes. The tin outside taps again. "I didn't," he says. "Not certain." And there it is, the gap between certainty and permission. Martha moves her chair closer and reaches for my wrist. I pull back before I mean to. Her hand stops. "Only your pulse," she says. Jacob turns toward me, and his face looks so young I almost feel sorry for him before I feel afraid for myself. "Ma'am said after a year it was best to be prepared," he tells me. His voice catches on prepared. "She spoke to Martha after our wedding." I stare at the brown oil stain on Martha's cuff. "Before?" I ask. Jacob nods. His hand moves toward mine. I stop breathing. He doesn't touch me. "I thought this was care," he says, almost childlike. I want to pull away and move closer at the same time. That's the truth. Martha asks whether she may feel my belly through the dress. I don't answer. Jacob whispers, "It's all right." And because his permission fills the room before mine does, Martha begins. Her fingers are warm through the wool, which somehow makes it worse. She presses lightly while I fix my eyes on the flour sack curtain with the faded red rooster near the hem. Nothing she does is rough. Nothing looks cruel. That matters. It also doesn't change that I'm sitting still because no one has told me I can say stop. Martha asks if mornings make me sick. I shake my head. She asks if my breasts are sore. My face burns so hot the lamp glass blurs. Jacob studies the floorboards. Likely early, she says, folding her hands. We'll check again in 2 weeks. We. I hear that word clearly. Not you, not Sarah, we. I don't know what to call what I feel. My jaw aches from holding tight, and 3 fingers on my left hand shake against the chair rung until I sit on them. After Martha leaves, Jacob latches the door and stands with his back to it. Neither of us speaks until the stove gives a small iron pop. I clear the untouched cups. One has a brown ring halfway down where the coffee cooled, and I scrub though the mark is only shadow. Jacob says, I wanted to do right. I believe him. That's what makes the memory hard to set down. I say, you knew before me. He answers, I knew what might happen. We are both right, and neither answer reaches the hurt. My body feels public, as if every window has lost its curtain. I notice a loose thread on the rug where Martha's boot had been. I pull it once, then again, until the blue stripe puckers. Jacob kneels to stop my hand, but I hide it under my apron. The next morning, Mary arrives with a list of what Martha will need. Neither of us understood that a possibility wasn't the same as my permission. Jacob had been taught that arranging care was his duty, and I had been taught that accepting it was mine. So my mother-in-law and husband chose the woman who would examine me and enter the room when I gave birth before anyone asked whether I wanted her. Mary's list was written on the back of a seed invoice. Clean rags, lard, thread, 2 basins, old sheets, raspberry leaves. At the bottom, in smaller writing, she added, Sarah frightens easy. I had never told her that. Jacob had. He wasn't trying to shame me. He thought the note would make Martha gentle. Still, 3 people discussed my fear as a household problem while I stood beside them holding a basket of onions. Not one asked what I was afraid of. I didn't know there were words for what was missing in that kitchen. I didn't know a woman could choose who touched her, ask what would happen first, refuse an examination, or request that her husband leave. In our district, knowledge came after obedience, if it came at all. Women passed down recipes with exact measures, 1 cup of molasses, 2 spoons of ginger, but spoke of our bodies in fog. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. Jacob was blind in one way, and I was blind in another, and the people who raised us called that innocence. Years later, a nurse would say one sentence that made my hands go cold. You are the one who gives permission. 7 words. I had been married, examined, and prepared for birth without hearing them once. That's the thing nobody tells you. Silence can be handed down like a quilt, and grief sleeps beneath it for years. For years, I learned to make myself small before anyone asked. I would fold my nightdress at the foot of the bed with the sleeves tucked inward, as if even the cloth should take up less room. When Jacob reached for my hand in public, I held it. When he asked if I was tired, I said no. By the time our second child came, I could leave my body without leaving the room. I counted ceiling boards. I named jars on the pantry shelf. Beans, salt, dried apples, cloves. I learned to breathe so quietly that even I could barely hear it. That was my trick. Not a good trick, but a useful one. We had 6 children in 12 years, and each time Martha arrived with the same black bag and the same peppermint soap. I thought I was the only woman who knew how to disappear while still answering questions. Turns out that was the district's most common skill. At home, I built rules no one knew were rules. I kept a candle stub in the washstand drawer and lit it when I needed to feel that one thing in the room belonged to me. I slept on the left side because the wall was cool against my shoulder and I could press my palm to it when I felt far away. I saved scraps of paper from flour sacks and wrote one sentence at a time, then burned them in the cook stove before breakfast. Sometimes the sentence was, "I am here." Sometimes it was only my name. Jacob saw the ash once and asked what I had burned. A bad recipe, I told him. That almost made me laugh. Dark humor is a thin blanket, but on some nights it is still a blanket. He kissed the top of my head and went to milk the cows, believing me, because he wanted peace as much as I did. The first time I understood that other women were doing the same thing, we were quilting a double wedding ring pattern in Ruth's front room. The frame hung from 4 ropes, and one rope creaked each time someone leaned forward. Lena sat across from me, her thimble dented at the tip, and Mary's cousin Ada worked beside the window where frost feathered the glass. Ruth said, "Martha came early again. No one asked for whom." Ada's needle stopped above the blue cloth. Lena's mouth tightened, just once. "Did she ask?" I said. It came out too loud. Ruth looked at me, then at the door. "Ask what?" she said. I could have told them. My whole chest leaned toward the words. But Ada pushed her needle through and whispered, "Best not." 4 letters of thread hung loose between her fingers, and I watched her knot them instead. Lena told me part of her story 2 winters later, while we rinsed sheets in a copper tub. The water had gone gray, and a bar of lye soap sat in a cracked saucer between us. She said her husband brought the deacon's wife to their house after Lena missed 2 cycles. "I didn't know she was coming," she said, 7 words. Then she twisted the sheet until her knuckles shone. The deacon's wife had brought herbs, rules, and a chair. Lena never said what happened in that chair. She only said, "I left myself there." And then sorry, give me a second. I can still see the pink scar across Lena's thumb from a canning jar that broke the summer before. That is what I watched while neither of us spoke. By our 3rd year of friendship, we knew each other's silence better than our own voices. Elsie was the one I nearly told. One July evening, she found me behind the smokehouse with my apron pressed to my mouth. She sat beside me on an overturned milk pail and said nothing. I opened my lips. Then the supper bell rang, and I stood. Questions were handled gently, which made them hard to fight. If a woman wondered aloud, someone brought soup. If she cried, someone quoted a hymn. If she said she wanted something different, the word selfish appeared like a stain no one admitted spilling. Ada once asked whether she could see a doctor in town instead of Martha. Her mother-in-law stroked her sleeve and said, "Why borrow trouble?" The next Sunday, people prayed for Ada's restless spirit, no punishment, no shouting, just kindness turned sideways until she doubted herself. 4 months later, Ada used Martha. I remember, actually wait, it was 5 months. The creek had thawed, and Ada's yellow crocuses were already open. She came to meeting with a baby wrapped in green wool and would not look toward the women's benches. I was 67 when I first saw the word consent printed on a page. By then, Jacob had been gone 9 years, and I was living with my oldest daughter outside Lancaster, in a small white house where the refrigerator hummed all night. A nurse at the clinic handed me a folded sheet before an exam. Near the bottom was a drawing of 2 people with a line between them, and under it, "Consent can be withdrawn at any time." I read the sentence 3 times. The paper shook against my thumb. The room smelled of rubbing alcohol and orange hand cream, and the clock above the sink clicked so loudly I thought something inside it was breaking. My knees went weak, not from age, from recognition. That line reached backward through 50 years and opened every locked room at once. The nurse was named Colleen. She wore purple shoes with white rubber soles and had a tiny silver moon pinned to her badge. She asked whether I understood. I said yes, then no, then not before today. She sat down instead of standing over me. That small thing nearly undid me. I wasn't angry, not first. I was sad in a way that had weight, like carrying wet wool. Sad for the girl in the gray dress who thought silence was goodness. Sad for Jacob, who had been handed duty without knowledge and called it manhood. Sad for Lena, Ada, Elsie, and all the women whose fear was treated like weather, unpleasant, expected, and no one's fault. That's the thing nobody tells you. Learning the right word doesn't erase what happened. It gives the grief a handle. For months after that, I grieved the life we might have had if someone had taught us one clear sentence. Not a different husband, not a different faith, a different beginning. I pictured Jacob asking, "Is this all right?" and waiting long enough to hear me. I pictured Martha explaining each step before she touched me. I pictured myself saying no without the roof falling in. That is what was stolen, the chance for tenderness to be chosen instead of endured. I tried to explain this to a woman at the senior center while we sorted puzzle pieces into a tin tray. She said, "But he loved you, didn't he?" I said yes. She smiled as if the question had solved everything. I didn't know how to tell her that love without knowledge can still leave bruises no one sees. So I found the corner pieces and went quiet again, and still, there are things I miss. I miss the sound of horses before dawn, hooves pressing the packed lane while breath rose silver in the cold. Jacob used to whistle one low note while buckling the harness, always the same note, and our bay mare would turn her head toward him. I miss bread from the wood stove, the bottom crust dark enough to tap with a fingernail, the whole kitchen smelling of yeast and apple wood. Mary taught me to test the loaf by listening, not looking. I miss my grandmother's hands when she prayed, one thumb bent from an old break, flour caught in the lines no matter how hard she scrubbed. Those gifts are real. I carry them. I am homesick for a place that hurt me. The harm was silence dressed as care. 5 words. I can say them now without spitting out everything else I loved. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. I know because I swept their floors. I don't reject every hymn, every quilt, every jar lined straight on a cellar shelf. I choose what stays. I keep the patience in my hands, the bread, the dawn, the way women showed up with soup before anyone asked. And I leave behind the rule that care can be done to someone without their voice. Sometimes I still feel tenderness for Mary, rubbing rust from that jar lid because she had no better language either. She passed down the only map she had. It just left whole parts of us unnamed. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. If you learned obedience before you learned choice, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are not broken because it took years to find the words. Your body didn't betray you when it froze, went quiet, or found some small place to hide. It was trying to keep you here. And the younger you, the one who counted ceiling boards, watched the door, or said yes because no had never been offered, she wasn't weak. She was doing the best she could with a map that had whole roads missing. Maybe you're still inside the community, listening with the sound low. I see you. Maybe you left and still miss the smell of home after rain. I see you. Maybe you're thinking of leaving and feel guilty before you've packed one thing. I see you. Maybe you're married and only now realizing that love and choice were never taught as the same thing. I see you. Maybe you recognized yourself a few minutes ago and your hands have not stopped shaking. Put them somewhere warm. Breathe once. You don't have to name everything tonight. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this, or the moment that made something in your own story click into place. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, but I'm getting closer. Subscribe to Rebecca Amish Home if you want to stay beside me while these voices come out of the quiet. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. I'm 81 now, and I finally know this much. Care that erases your voice isn't care. You were always allowed to choose yourself.